Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today I'll reveal everything I've painted during the first week of my 30 Days of Watercolor and Beyond challenge. I'll tell you about my experience with my new personalized watercolor palette that I set up in last week's video, and I'll share my joys and frustrations with working exclusively in this medium for the past week. First, I want to share a bit about why I created this challenge while I paint a big silly fish. In last week's video, I told you all about my watercolor journey over the years and how I developed this desire to set up a personalized dream palette just for me, with all my favorite colors, lots of granulating paints, and of course important must-haves for mixing. I've wanted to create my own color palette for a while and also use watercolor more again. I think it's such a beautiful medium, but I rarely use it anymore, and if I do, it's mostly for mixed media. I just love how watercolors flow and create these unexpected mixes, blooms, and effects. It's something that distinguishes watercolor from a lot of other art materials. As you know, I'm not so much into sweet, delicate, romantic art, but watercolor doesn't have to be like that. I follow some watercolor artists that create really cool art. Watercolor can be strong, graphic, and modern. Its color gradients can also look really cool when combined with other materials, like strong lines or acrylic markers. But I've neglected this medium too much. So why did I start this challenge? So I had been wanting to make a new go-to palette, but I worried that I wouldn't really have the time to explore it in depth. You know, since I started this channel, I've been making one video per week, and it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy making them, but they also take a lot of time. So far, it has always meant that whatever the focus of the week is, I don't really find time to draw or paint things that fall outside the scope of that week's video. And that's why I thought, if I'm going to buy some new watercolors and put all this work into making a new palette, it deserves to be thoroughly tested and used. And that's how the idea for the series was born. I thought, why not just turn what seemed like a problem, the weekly YouTube rhythm, and turn it into a fun 30-day challenge. It's been a while that I've done a challenge. I couldn't really find a suitable one in September, and so I just created my own. And to keep it interesting for myself as well as for you guys, I had the idea to use weekly themes where I use the palette in different ways. So in this first week, I wanted to use only the palette, nothing else allowed. It was tough for me, guys. I'm so used to grabbing whatever I feel like in the moment for my art card and mixing all the materials without any limitations. I've really gotten used to making mixed media art. I also find it challenging to make paintings with only watercolor that don't look just delicate and pretty. Pure watercolor was a real challenge for me. But I did it, and I think I benefited from limiting myself in this way. It forced me to find watercolor solutions, consider more deeply all the possibilities, and sometimes it forced me to wait and let something dry before adding the next layer. I studied other artists' works more to figure out how they use this medium in a way that I enjoy. And actually, I had so many more ideas and plans for paintings for the first week, but I was a bit limited in time as I also went to visit my family in the weekend. And I'm also sharing daily reels over on Instagram, so all this video creation takes a lot of time away from actual painting. So what were my main takeaways from this week? 1. Practice makes perfect. And I need more practice. Like I said, I've really neglected watercolor, and I could tell. I like some of the paintings I've made, but others, well, let's just say I was imagining a slightly different outcome, and I can see all of the flaws. This also goes for brushwork. While a great watercolor artist makes it look so easy, there's actually so many things that have to go right with watercolor. You don't just have to be precise with lines, but also control the amount of water and pigment on your brush, know your paper, and understand how your colors interact with each other. Some pigments are more transparent than others, some are stronger, some are bigger and therefore settle differently on the paper, and so on. Practice makes perfect. And so this week was a good start. Quite a few of the paintings I made I considered as practice, for example to explore how the colors would behave together or to practice my brush strokes. 2. I still have to figure out this palette, and I might have to fine-tune it. I've only worked for 1 week with my new watercolor palette so far. I obviously love lots of the colors, that's why I selected them. But I am not sure the combination of all the colors works. For instance, the cobalt teal blue, my cool single pigment blue for mixing, it's a very transparent pigment. It's beautiful, but I might need to add another cold bright blue that is a bit stronger. I'm also not quite sure about the Tundra Orange and Galaxy Brown from the Granulating sets. I included them to have a good variety, not just blues and greens, but they are also quite transparent, and I'm just not totally sure yet if I really need them in this palette. I will keep testing. But this is also what this challenge was about, to really do a deep dive and fully explore and test it, to see if it's good or if it needs some tweaking. I'll let you know at the end of the 30-day challenge what the final verdict is and what changes, if any, I will make to the palette. 3. You can't make masterpieces every day. As I've mentioned, as part of the challenge, I committed to sharing reels about my daily paintings on Instagram. I'm not great at posting regularly on Instagram, and I'm trying to get better at this. I'm also not really a real creator. For a long time, I only stuck to pictures. But when I started with YouTube and learned about video editing, I thought I should also post more reels. So this challenge has forced me to make a little reel every day. And obviously you can't create a masterpiece every day. Neither the paintings nor the reels will be perfect all the time. But I believe this is not necessary. I am not perfect, obviously, and I want to be honest about it. Social media should reflect reality and not just some polished version of it. I enjoy seeing other people's struggles and thoughts rather than just the perfect results. So takeaway 3 is about accepting and embracing your imperfect self and sharing your growth journey with others. 4. Paper matters. Paper obviously makes an unbelievable difference, especially for watercolor. When I prepared for this challenge, I went through all my paper and I found all types of watercolor paper and so many of these little sample packs that I bought over the years. So I put it all in a stack on our art table, and so now I can grab whatever I feel like in the moment. I'll show you. Here I have a collection of loose paper that can be used for watercolor. Some comes from unfinished sketchbooks that I finally admitted to myself I will never finish, so I took out the remaining paper. Some is just loose paper, some are sample sheets. It has been quite nice to have this bundle on the table. It's really made it easy to grab what I need in any given moment. I might try to continue this practice beyond the challenge. And then I also have this other stack. Some of these are tiny blocks of paper that I bought because I wanted to try it, like sugarcane paper, bamboo paper, this Japanese paper, some Italian cotton paper, some fancy sample packs like this one from Jackson's, this one from Saunders Waterford, this one from Milford. They all contain one little sheet of each of the brand's papers. And then here I also have my Hanemühle full cotton watercolor sketchbook and this really nice aquarelle paper I have. I have a few more types, also even bigger, but I thought this would be handy to have on the table during my 30-day challenge so I can just grab and go. But so let's get to the interesting part. I obviously knew paper matters so much for watercolor, but I still thought most of these types of paper, all of which are watercolor papers of decent to very good quality, that they would all perform well. But I really had to face the fact that watercolor behaves so differently on them. I will show you now everything that I painted during the first week, including some color tests, and give you some concrete examples of the paper not doing what I wanted or expected. Here are some little birds I painted. I decided to make 6 of them, all facing each other. And basically I decided to do these birds because I felt like it was a good way to play around with the colors, test out some color combinations, and see how the colors would flow into each other. Not sure which exactly is my favorite. This one here, I really like the shape. This next one, I really love the color combinations. But I think this one right here might be my absolute favorite. He just looks so cute, you guys. What do you think? What's your favorite bird? Then, of course, I painted the little flower bouquet, which you saw me do. I'm just not really sure which orientation I prefer. What do you think? What's the best orientation for this? Then I did these pears that I actually quite like. I especially like the blocky colors. But just again, I'm not quite sure if the paper was the best. I felt like it sucked in the colors quite a lot, and it's not quite as bright as I wanted it to be. Now this next one is super simple, but it's one of my favorites. I just used one granulating color from my set, and I painted this branch with leaves on a fully wet piece of paper. Don't remember exactly what this was. I think it was some sample paper, but it's a really good cotton paper. And I will try to show this to you on the camera. I do really like how the colors, the different pigments separated, but I wouldn't exactly call this granulation. It's not really what I expected, but I do like how this orange pigment kind of separated from the rest. It creates a bit like a glow on the edges of the leaves. But this is also an example of how some especially high quality cotton paper doesn't really work best for granulation. Like if you really want the paints, the pigments to separate in the whole area that you paint with a color, this really good paper is not really good for that. I think a medium quality watercolor paper is better because the water will sit on top of this paper for a bit and allow the pigments to separate and settle. On another day I did this still life of my coffee mug and my cafetière. Now I do really like the color palette of this and also the reflections in the coffee maker. But overall, there's still some issues I have with this painting. It's not quite what I expected. Now this next one is basically just an exercise, but I can still like the results sometimes. I just start somewhere at the top and then I paint consecutive abstract shapes. I think this is a great exercise because you have to be really precise with your brush work, your lines. Sometimes you want the colors to touch each other, to flow, but sometimes you also want to leave just the tiniest gaps. And because you're doing something symmetrical, this is also really challenging. Then this next one is actually the first painting I did. It's my watercolor box. And initially I thought this might be my first day reel, the first painting I wanted to share, but I just didn't like how it turned out. I feel like I tried to be too precise and it just looks too tight. Maybe at some point I will give this another shot and try to do this again and try to be more loose next time. And then here we have the silly fish that you watched me paint in the beginning. Obviously I wanted to paint this again because you just have a big area where you can let the colors flow into each other and you can let them granulate. What I like especially is the kind of negative space areas that I did down here and also at the top above the eye. And I do think it's a cute fish. It's obviously more silly, but I think this could work for a children's illustration, for instance. Now here we have the swatches that I did of the entire watercolor set. On each page you see basically one row, one half of the watercolor set. On the left page you see all the granulating colors as well as 3 non-granulating colors but mixed pigment Daniel Smith paints. I actually painted these swatches twice, and this was because of paper issues. Now I will show you a bit more in detail. Now we can see that sometimes the granulation on the right side is a bit better. For instance, down here for this sort of purple color, I think the granulation works much better on the right side. The right is a cellulose paper, slightly less good quality. But the downside is that the water doesn't dry evenly on this paper. And sometimes this can cause real problems. Like up here you can see the edges that are not dried evenly. Here we have a bloom. And then on a few of these swatches we also see the area that stayed wet the longest, and where it seems like we also have some of the gum arabic that concentrated there, and that is now left as some shiny blobs on the swatch. So first I painted this one, but I really wasn't happy with how it looked. I mean, it's supposed to be a beautiful swatch card, and so I did it again. And overall I think the left one looks much nicer, but as I already said, in terms of granulation, it's not always great to use high quality cotton paper. Now here I wanted to test a bit what kind of colors I could mix by using my lemon yellow, so a cold yellow, and also my quinacridone rose, so a cold red. And then as you can see I mixed it with different types of blues. Now I have to say, unfortunately not all of these blues are the same. You have to read the label underneath to know which blue I really used, but let me show you two that actually compare. So for instance here we have the cobalt teal blue, both times mixed with the lemon yellow and the quinacridone rose. And you can see on the bigger paper, which is a cellulose paper, first of all we have this strange granulation going on, which was very unexpected, but at least I was able to sort of mix the paint on the paper. Whereas here on this smaller sheet, which is the Italian cotton paper, the paint that I put down, it kind of gets sucked in immediately. You can't really mix the paint on the page. And so you can see on the Italian paper, also in the other swatches, that you have all these brush strokes from where I put the paint down initially, that you can still see them all. So overall on this paper, which is cellulose watercolor paper, the paint stayed on top of the surface for longer. And then it dried a bit more evenly, even if we see some granulation. And the color mixes are more beautiful. Whereas if we look at this Italian paper, none of these swatches really produced nice mixes. Most of these mixes look more like layers of different pigments, and they're all sort of muddy and dirty. None of these gradients really look beautiful, or really produced beautiful colors, I should say. So the most astonishing example of paper differences. And I was actually planning to do some more tests of this on different paper, and I might still do that. I just didn't have the time yet to do it. Another difference between types of paper is how long it takes to dry and how evenly it dries. So I did some color stains, splotches, and you can see on this green stain here, for instance, how unevenly this dried. And this creates these kind of blooming effects. This can be beautiful, of course, if you want it, but it can also be really frustrating if you want an even layer of color. On this gray stain here, this is high quality cotton paper, and I think we can just see clearly how beautifully and evenly this dried. And then here again we have a cellulose paper, and I just wanted to do sort of one really big brush stroke from left to right. But as you can see, we have this dark swirl in the middle, and that's because once this area was wet, the paper buckled and then all of the paint was pooling in this area. And even though I tried to shift the paper around a bit, it didn't really help. So all the paint settled in this area and it dried completely unevenly again. So I suppose what it all means is that if you really want to produce a finished, polished painting, you should be really familiarized with both your color palette and with the paper you're using. You know, make some tests first, or even better, use consistently only a couple of papers that you really know, where you can predict how your watercolors will behave. So this was the first week of the challenge. What do you think, guys? What piece is your favorite? I'm really curious to know. Have you faced the same struggles with paper that I've had? What are your paper recommendations? What's your favorite paper for watercolor? Let me know in the comments. In week 2 of my challenge, I'm going to add pencils to the mix. So I'll still be using this watercolor palette every day, but I'll be adding both regular and water-soluble color pencils to the mix. So if you want, why don't you join in? You can just paint any day you want, or pick a particular week, like week 2, and just paint along. If you decide to participate and you share your drawings on Instagram, please tag me and use the hashtag 30daysbeyondwatercolor so I can see your creations. And of course, if you want to see what I paint every day, follow me on Instagram to see my daily reels. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you again next week. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button so you will never miss out on any of my future videos, including to see how it goes for the rest of the challenge. Until then, stay creative and take care.